Chapter 408 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 2. I'm afraid it won't do. The imperial edict mentioned you too, so you have to go. Besides, don't you want to eliminate your sinful statuses? This is the best opportunity to do so. Although Manager Liu didn't outright mention the absoluteness of this mandate, his tone made it certain. The couple knew they couldn't hide from it, so they nodded. When she sent him out, Zhu Ying reminded Manager Liu, after entering the capital, winter should be starting, so we must bring more straw and other things to keep the carriage warm. Otherwise, the frozen sweet potatoes won't be able to be used as seeds. All right, I'll be careful. Manager Liu nodded solemnly and then rushed to the manor. After dinner, they took a piece of beef and went to their old house. Madame Qiao, who had just put down her bowl, looked at the meat in their hands and was a little confused. Why did they send meat at such a time? But she didn't ask much. Oh, you guys are here. Have you eaten? If you haven't eaten, come and eat together. We came after eating. Jiyu Chungrui handed the meat to Mrs. Guo, who had stood up. Then, he told them that they would enter the capital to receive a reward. One don't know when he'll be back from the capital, so one came to tell you in advance. This is great news. Maybe we can take the opportunity to return to the capital. Mrs. Liu immediately smiled when she heard that. You think so? Do you think it's good to return to the capital without any power or influence? Father Jiyu replied unhappily. He sighed and continued, there's nothing you can do to stop this trip. Since you two are going with the third prince, be sure to follow him and not act on your own. In addition, you must be careful of the first prince's people and stay away from the fourth prince's men. Staying alive is more important than anything else. Also, the Empress has always been at odds with Princess Pingyang. Naturally, she wants to eliminate our Jiyu family as soon as possible. Try not to get in touch with her if possible. Second Uncle Jiyu echoed. Madame Qiao nodded in agreement. Indeed, the capital is a sinkhole. You must be careful. If there's something you can't avoid, look for concubine, and I saved her life when one was young, and we got along quite well. She and the Empress Dowager are cousins and have always been very close. At a critical moment, she can protect your lives. However, you can't use it simply because it's likely that she will do what you ask her to do to repay this debt. Why didn't you use it when we were kicked out? Mrs. Liu asked indignantly. If they had used it back then, would they even have lived such a miserable life in this remote place? Do you think concubine and would dare defy an imperial edict? If the emperor wants to sack us out, it would be useless even if we have the Empress Dowager on our side. Madame Qiao answered unhappily. She hesitated and continued, when you reach the capital, go to the Ministry of Revenue's young family and see your aunt and see how she's doing. If they're not doing well, bring them back. Also, that uncle of yours is on the first prince's side. You must be careful. Father Jiyu quickly added. I understand. If it doesn't work out, well, bring auntie back. Jiyu Chongrue nodded. After that, they chatted for a while more. However, most of the time, it was Father Jiyu and second Uncle Jiyu analyzing the capital's political situation. Zhu Ying also knew that her father, Headmaster Zhu, was the father-in-law of the fourth prince on the surface but sided with the emperor. After chatting for a while, the two bade farewell. When they returned home, the village had already quieted down. They locked their doors and brought Zhuang into the interspace. After finishing the work in her interspace, Zhu Ying took the opportunity to put all the fish, aged about a year old, into the river outside the village, then began packing her luggage. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 409 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 3. Because they had been holed up at home for the past few years, they had no decent clothes. Zhu Ying had no choice but to take out the best cloth in her interspace and use the sewing machine to make 2 sets of winter clothes. She made 2 more cloaks. The outer layer was made of dark satin, and the inner layer was made of a thin quilt made of silk. Of course, the opening at the bottom was open and could be replaced with a thicker one at any time. After they were done, it was already late at night, so the two slept in the interspace. The next day, they woke up early and brought Zhuang to the manor. They reviewed the number of sweet potatoes they were bringing along with Chang Shun and started loading the carriages when Manager Liu arrived. They were busy until evening. Manager Liu found the two and said, "You two go home and pack up, and we will leave after breakfast tomorrow. Remember to patch up your carriage with your own bedding. According to the third prince, we will be camping in the wilderness on the way to the capital." "Understood. After we leave, please take care of the manor and the restaurant, Uncle Liu." Zhu Ying nodded. "I will. Be careful, you two. Listen more and talk less when you reach the capital." "Sorry to trouble you." Zhu Ying nodded. Afterward, she gave some additional instructions to Sun Hongliang, Chang Shun, and Uncle Nyan before returning to the village. After entering the village, they went to the village chief, patriarch, and Jiyu Zi's house to say their goodbyes. Finally, Jiyu Chungrui went to the Tian family and called Tian Jiawang out. After telling him about them entering the capital, he said, "Our families are always close to each other, so 111 leave the house to you. If the winter gets too cold, I'll have to trouble you to burn some firewood to warm up the house occasionally. No problem. Leave this to me. By the way, what about the restaurant after you leave? Refer to Sun Hongliang. He'll inform you when it's time to open for business." "Alright, then, I wish you all a safe journey." Jiyu Chungrui smiled and nodded, then went home. Coincidentally, Zhu Ying's beef noodles were also readied, so the couple had dinner. After the meal, the two put all the valuable things in the house into the interspace. As for Zhuang, they decided to put him in the interspace so that he wouldn't have to suffer with the others. The next morning, they took 2 sets of thick bedding, their luggage, a large bag of beef jerky, some dried vegetables, and a bag of meat floss made from beef and rushed to the manor. Halfway there, they bumped into Father Jiyu and second Uncle Jiyu. The two of them took out a big bag of vermicelli and handed it to them. "There's nothing better at our home now. One hope you two don't mind the shabbiness." "How can that be? This is good stuff." Jiyu Chungrui took it. "Keep this vermicelli a secret for the time being. In a year or two, it might become our clan's income source." The two brothers smiled and nodded, and replied, "We understand. You must be careful on this trip. As for your aunt's family, if it's too troublesome, then forget it. We can't go against the Yang family now." Jiyu Chungrui nodded with a complicated expression. These words were good for them, but it would be a blow to his aunt. However, he also knew Father Jiyu and the others' intentions, so he did not say anything. After exchanging a few polite words, he set off. When they arrived at the village entrance, the village chief gave them 20 boiled eggs, and they received a cooked rooster from the patriarch. At the same time, he gave a firm reminder. Especially the patriarch, who repeatedly emphasized that it was good as long as they returned safely. With this delay, by the time they reached the manor, Manager Liu and the others were almost ready. Finally, the couple collected a large pot of stewed beef from Unlelsi Nyan and set off with Manager Liu's convoy. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 410 Entering the Capital for a Reward. 4. When they arrived at the town, the third prince had already arrived outside the city and was in the midst of giving orders to County Magistrate Kong. After they finished speaking, Jiyu Chungrui exited the carriage and greeted them. Afterward, he followed behind the third prince's carriage and set off. Because they were using mules to transport the sweet potato seeds, their journey was decently paced. By the evening, they had already reached the border of Dongyang province. After setting up camp, the third prince found the couple and said, "I'm sorry, but because of the limited tents, you can rest in my tent, and I'll rest in my study." "How can that be? You don't have to be so polite. Once we leave Dongyang province, our journey will speed up. As for your horses, you don't have to worry about them. Someone will help you feed them." "Alright, well listen to you." Jiyu Chungrui nodded. "By the way, we have a lot of cooked food in our carriage. Do come and eat with us later." Zhu Ying offered. Yes. There's a cooked rooster and a jar of stewed beef. We can't let it go bad, so do come and eat with us. I won't stand on ceremony then." When the third prince thought of Zhu Ying's cooking, he salivated a little. He nodded and replied, "Alright, I'll get them to send some more dishes later. After the third prince said that, he brought them back to his tent. After confirming their tent's location, Jiyu Chungrui brought his bedding over. At the same time, he called someone to bring all the food down from their carriages except for the beef jerky. When they returned to their carriage, they separated their portion and sent the rest to the kitchen, especially the meat floss. When added to soup, meat floss not only improved the flavor but also increased the nutritional value. That's right, the soldiers' meals at night were thick soup with flour dumplings, while their dry rations were reserved for during the day. Of course, they had a small bowl of soup each, and the third prince's eyes lit up after taking a sip. After many years stationed in Dongyang, he knew it was considered great if the troops down below could fill their stomachs 70% to 80% full. They were also restricted to eating meat only on special occasions. However, it would be different if it was this meat floss. The soldiers could still eat meat but would consume less. The main point was that the taste was great. He hesitated momentarily and asked, "This meat floss is a good thing for our troops. One wonder if you can sell me the recipe." Ju Ying shook her head and said, "You're too polite. There's really nothing challenging about this meat floss recipe. Roast the meat after preparing it in the same way as you would for stew. The only difference is that the meat floss must be beaten while roasting until it becomes meat floss." The third prince nodded in understanding. "When you're free, I'll have to trouble you to teach my chefs." "No problem. I'll teach when I have the ingredients." Ju Ying nodded. At night, because he was in the military camp, Jiyu Chungrui did not enter Ju Ying's interspace. Instead, he stayed outside to read his medical scriptures. After Ju Ying finished her work in her interspace, it was already past midnight when she came out. Perhaps she was not used to sleeping in the wild, she subconsciously spread out her spiritual sense to confirm her safety. Her spiritual sense had already reached a radius of about 100 miles, and she could see everyone's every move clearly. What she didn't expect was that she didn't need to go through her warehouse in her interspace to follow the people's faith anymore. When she looked over at the third prince, she saw the purple glow around him getting heavier and darker. However, the spot between his eyebrows had a black-red tinge. This was a sign of a crowning calamity. Follow current novels on Top Novel Full. CM. Chapter 411 Entering the Capital for a Reward. 5. The next day, Ju Ying informed Jiyu Chungrui of what she saw, and the two began to pay attention to every move around them. Especially Ju Ying, who had been staring at her surroundings because she knew they would not have a good time if anything happened to the third prince. They had to do their best to ensure the safety of the third prince. For the next 3 days, everything went smoothly. However, the black-red color between the third prince's eyebrows became thicker and thicker, and Ju Ying knew this was the darkness before dawn. One night, they decided to camp on the outskirts of a village. After the soldiers stopped, a portion of them immediately began setting up camp while their captains went to a well in the village to fetch water. After Ju Ying settled down, she saw a mountain nearby and wanted to know if she could find wild food to eat. She couldn't take it anymore if all she had to eat daily were dumpling soup and black steamed buns. She immediately discovered something wrong when she spread out her spiritual senses to look at the village. Firstly, there were too few people. There were only a dozen families, but this wasn't what triggered her suspicion. What alerted her was that these people's houses were very run down, which meant they were not rich. However, there were rice and black noodles at their homes, and they all looked very strong. This was especially true for the laborious. Not only were they strong, but they all walked with a similar footwork pattern. They were not ordinary farmers. After that, she carefully searched the village and soon found an old man hiding in a house that was almost in ruins, staring at the captain as he fetched water. His expression was a mix of excitement, nervousness, and seriousness. It was evident that he was up to no good. Ju Ying probed her senses into the well. The water was clear, and she did not find anything unusual. But when she raised her head to look at the captains, she didn't expect to see their brows covered in a black cloud. Could it be? She found Jiyu Chungrui and told him about this. "I suspect that there's something wrong with the water. It might have been drugged. What should we do now?" "Don't fret. I'll think of a way." Jiyu Chungrui turned around to look for the third prince and obtained his permission to enter the village to buy some vegetables. He brought 10 soldiers and walked into the village. As soon as he entered the village, he quickly understood why Ju Ying, who had no experience in investigating, could find the problem. These people were too abnormal. How could they look this muscular in a year of such disaster? He could also faintly sense the killing intent coming off their bodies. These killers were probably disguised as laborious. He looked for a woman and asked, "Miss, do you have any extra vegetables at home? Can we want to buy some?" No, you guys, hurry up and leave." The woman glanced at him and ran away in a panic. At the same time, when the people on the street saw this, they immediately turned around and went home. Only a few men stayed around, busy cutting firewood or repairing roofs in the village. The woodcutter was cutting his wood earnestly, but the roof repairman didn't look like he was even doing a good job. He didn't even look like a person who was used to this kind of work. After confirming his guesses, Jiyu Chungrui turned around and said, "Fine, since they don't welcome us, let's hold on to our rations for a few more days." After saying that, he led the group of soldiers back to the military camp and told the third prince about the abnormality in the village. "I'm afraid they are bandits from the mountains, so we must be careful. Just in case, I'm afraid the well water we drew can't be drunk. I have to go and check it out." The third prince turned his head to look at the village, then at carriages filled with sweet potato seeds. He nodded and said, "There's nothing wrong with being careful. Go ahead." "Yes." Jiyu Chungrui replied and turned to go to the kitchen. When he saw them pouring water into the pot, he immediately stopped them. Wait a minute. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 412 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 6. Oh, Dr. Jiyu. What brings you here? At this moment, the plump kitchen chef called out. There's something one need to do. The village is desolate, so for safety's sake, I'm here to check if the water is drinkable. This water looks so clear. It should be fine, right? Being clear doesn't mean that it's fine. It's better to be careful. The fat kitchen chef saw that he was insistent and did not object. Instead, he urged, "Then you better hurry up. Thousands of brothers are waiting to eat. I'll be quick." Jiyu Chungrui responded and then asked them to lower their heads to take a sniff. As expected, there was no smell. As for testing the poison, he didn't do that personally. He wouldn't fare well if it were poisoned, even if he did not die. At this moment, a lizard happened to pass by. Jiyu Chungrui went forward and grabbed it. He poured a bowl of water and threw the lizard into the bowl. When the fat kitchen chef saw this, he wanted to stop it, but he shut his mouth as he reached out his hand. The lizard rolled a few times in the water and quickly stopped moving. The vitality of these wild critters was resilient, especially when this lizard wasn't in deep waters, being in such a shallow bowl. If nothing had been wrong with the water or it had not been poisoned, it would not have died this quickly. The fat chef was stunned when he saw this. At the same time, a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Who wanted their lives? Coincidentally, the third prince followed them in. His heart sank when he saw this scene, and he roughly understood what was happening. This kind of poison was precious and not something ordinary people could come into contact with. He said, "Don't move. Use the water we brought with us to cook our dinner, and be careful not to use these buckets anymore." After saying that, he turned around and walked out. "Yes, sir." The fat chef immediately responded and called everyone to bring their water in. At the same time, Jiyu Chungrui also walked out with that bowl. He studied it on the way back but still could not determine what poison it was. The third prince called a few generals over, then asked them to pick some elite soldiers and arrange for them to set up a trap. Of course, it would be best if they could catch the perpetrator alive and find out who the mastermind was. They would still send them before the King of Hell if they couldn't capture them alive. On the other end of the line, Ju Ying knew she couldn't go out anymore after this incident. She just returned to the camp and took some water from her interspace to wash up. She saw Jiyu Chungrui come in with a bowl and asked curiously, "It's the well water, and a lizard was poisoned to death after being inside it." Unfortunately, We don't know what kind of poison it is. It's fine as long as we know we can't drink it. I sure wonder who the perpetrator is. It's hard to say. The third prince himself has many military merits and has contributed a lot to promoting the white sweet potato. Perhaps he has threatened the interests of some people. That's true. It looks like we have to be careful from now on. Yeah, we won't be able to sleep well until this matter is over. After that, with Ju Ying guarding him, Jiyu Chungrui went into the interspace to find out roughly what kind of poison it was. However, he could only confirm that it was a poison extracted from a plant. As for what kind of poison it was, he still needed to verify it in detail. After dinner, the third prince walked in and said, "Tonight, you guys go to the kitchen and hide. No matter what happens, don't come out. Alright, be careful." Jiyu Chungrui nodded. He took out a packet of poison powder and handed it to him. "This is a powder that poisons the wounds. You can put it on your swords." The third prince shook his head after hearing this. He disdained to do such a despicable act. Jiyu Chungrui saw this and did not force him. He just placed the bag of power on the only bed in the tent, then turned around and walked out with Ju Ying. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 413 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 7. However, in the dead of night, the couple sneaked back to the back of the main tent and waited for those people to appear. At the same time, Ju Ying used her spiritual sense to monitor everything in the village. Sure enough, a few figures sneaked into the camp just after midnight. When they saw some bodies lying on the ground, they did not check them carefully. Instead, they kicked it to the side and rushed to the main tent. After entering, it was quiet inside. One of them said, "It looks like we succeeded. We must see the corpse. Otherwise, if anything goes wrong, we will all die." The leader shook his head and went into the main tent. As they lifted the curtain, more than 10 people suddenly barged in and blocked the exit. "Not good." The leader cried out in surprise and barged in, intending to tear open one side of the tent and leave. Unexpectedly, the torches suddenly lit up just as they rushed in, and they were surrounded. "Surrender or die?" the third prince asked as he got off the bed. These assailants looked at each other and raised their swords to slash at him. The answer was self-evident. When the third prince saw this, he waved his hand and ordered his men to rush over while he hid to the side. Immediately, the tent fell in chaos. Seeing that they had been surrounded, these assailants retreated to the back of the tent while fending off the soldiers. It would be enough if even one of them could return to the village alive to report the situation here. However, there was a massive difference in the number of people on both sides. Even if the other party's martial arts were better than the elite soldiers, they were still restrained and could not get into a fighting stance. Also, several of these assailants were killed in battle. When they retreated to the back of the tent, only 2 people were left. When one of the 2 saw this, he immediately cut open a large hole in the tent and crawled out. However, halfway through, he was kicked back in. At the same time, his other companion was stabbed into a bloody mess and fell on him. When the soldiers saw this, they rushed forward and pulled his companion away before pressing him to the ground. After several searches, they found nothing except a small poison sac in his mouth. After that, he was directly escorted to the third prince. At the same time, Jiyu Chungrui and Ju Ying also came in from outside the tent. When the third prince saw them, his eyes flashed, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. A young general looked at the last survivor and said, "Your people are all dead now. You can live in seclusion as long as you tell me who you belong to. I only want to die with a complete body." That person raised his head and sneered. "A complete body, huh? However, since you dare to assassinate the third prince, you must be prepared to die a horrible death. Therefore, when we leave, we will take your corpses with us and hang them on the city gates of the next county. They will be eaten by eagles, crows, and other animals until nothing is left." The general smiled and stated, "You." That person looked at him in disbelief, then turned to look at the third prince. The third prince did not even look at him. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Take them all away. Just feed him the water from the village well." "Yes, sir." The young general responded and called for his soldiers to drag the bodies of him and his companions out. Only then did the third prince look at the couple and say, "You guys didn't sleep either? How can we sleep after such a big incident? I just wanted to see if I could help, and sure enough, I got a chance to kick someone back in." Ji Chongrue commented. At this moment, a series of messy footsteps came from outside, and there were even the cries of women and children. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 414 Entering the Capital for a Reward. 8. Come with me to help on this, then. After the third prince finished speaking, he left the tent. The couple knew the villagers had been captured and immediately followed him. The third prince asked the leading general, "Have you brought everyone?" "Yes, I brought everyone from the village." The general nodded. The third prince nodded and sat on a carriage parked at the side. When the general saw this, he went forward and swept his gaze across the crowd. "This is the third prince. He will let you all go as long as you tell the truth. Otherwise, don't blame us for giving you a taste of your own medicine." At this moment, Ju Ying spread her spiritual senses to look at everyone. Most of them had panicked looks on their faces, and their eyes were filled with despair. Only 2 people looked afraid, but their eyes were filled with coldness and a murderous intent. There was no hint of panic. Soon, someone came with a bucket of water. The general pointed and said, "Look at how clear the water is, but it was poisoned by you all." "What a pity. We didn't." An old man raised his head and refuted angrily. When Ju Ying saw him, she remembered that he had been monitoring the captain as he drew water in some ruins. She poked Ji Chongrue, and he immediately thought of the old man she had mentioned before. Thus, he went forward and scooped out a bowl of water. "Very well. Drink this bowl of water, and I'll believe you." The old man snorted coldly. "Child, how can you be so rude? I'm already so old. If you let me drink cold water, wouldn't that make me have a stomachache? How do you know it's cold water? It's boiled, and it just cools down. You won't get a stomachache. Don't worry." After finishing speaking, Ji Chongrue lifted the bowl to the old man's mouth. When the old man saw this, he immediately took a step back. When the general saw this, he immediately understood that the old man had probably participated in this sabotage. He went forward to take the bowl from Ji Chongrue's hand and then gave a soldier who was holding the old man a look. The soldier understood this and held him down tightly. When the general saw this, he pinched the old man's chin, pouring the bowl water into him. Although the old man struggled with all his might, he was still forced to drink a few mouthfuls. Another person hiding in the crowd saw this and shook off the soldiers beside him. He then quickly rushed out of the crowd. He pulled an iron hairpin from his hair and quickly rushed out of the crowd to stab the third prince. The third prince was slightly surprised but still dodged to the side and simultaneously kicked the assassin in the chest. Although the assassin managed to dodge the kick in time, he staggered back a few steps before stabilizing his body. When the soldiers saw this, they immediately protected the third prince behind them, then raised their swords and rushed over. When the assassin saw this, he knew he no longer had a chance. He took a bag from his pocket and was about to throw it at everyone. When Ju Ying saw this, she immediately shouted, "Step back." She then used her slingshot to shoot at the assassin's hand holding the bag of powder. Although the assassin had thrown the bag of powder out, it didn't get very far. Instead, the bag of powder fell around him. At the same time, the soldiers retreated. They later saw the assassin suffocating. He clasped his chest tightly and laid down stiffly a moment later. "What's this? Why is it so poisonous?" At this moment, a soldier curiously took 2 steps forward and exclaimed when he saw the assassin who was instantly poisoned to death. "If you don't want to die, stay away," Ji Chongrue warned. "Dig up a trench and bury him immediately," he ordered. A few soldiers close to the assassin felt their hair stand on end when they heard that. They immediately took an iron shovel to the side and buried the body and powder. "Dr. Ji, do you know what kind of poison it is?" the third prince asked. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 4:15 Entering the capital for a reward. 9. According to his symptoms, has most likely been poisoned with a powder made from the extract of the sap leaves of a tropical tree called the poison arrow tree. Its effect is to paralyze the heart, coagulate blood, seal blood vessels, and finally suffocate a person to death. Its toxicity is even more potent than that of a five-paced viper. As long as it touches you briefly, it can kill you. Jiyu Chungrue had just finished speaking when the old man twitched violently and kicked his leg out. The way the two died was similar, but one was fast, and the other was slower. It seems that the poison they were poisoned with came from the poison arrow tree, but in different forms. The third prince asked thoughtfully, "You mean this thing comes from the tropics? What do you mean by tropics?" The tropics are places that are very hot all year round. For example, the south of the Ming dynasty is especially hot and humid. South? The third prince's face turned solemn when he heard that. He looked at his general and said, "Continue the interrogation. If they don't speak, let them have a taste of this poison from afar." After speaking, he brought Jiyu Chungrue and his wife back to his tent. When the villagers heard this, they were shocked at first. However, when they saw that the outsiders were all dead, they immediately cried and told them what had happened during this period. About 3 days ago, 8 men with knives came to the village and killed all the strong laborers in the village. They would then hold the children of each family hostage to control them. If anyone disobeyed, he would kill their entire family. At this moment, the woman who had previously refused Jiyu Chengru's request to buy groceries kneeled and said, "Please let my child go. He's the only child of our 2 families." "Missus, hadn't the third prince had already given orders that only those who don't cooperate will be killed?" "We won't kill those who cooperate." The general went forward to help her up. "Really? Of course, the third prince's words are always true. I know the situation in the village. If you want to know anything else, just ask." The woman immediately wiped her tears when she heard that. The young general's mouth twitched, and he thought inwardly, "She's sure good at controlling her tears." Thus, he asked directly, "Do you know who these outsiders are? Or did they reveal anything?" "I just know about the old man, and he's the butler of the Liu family in town. The land in our village belongs to the Liu family." Yes, on the surface, the Liu family appears to be benevolent, but that couldn't be further from the truth. When the son of the Liu family sees a girl he likes, he will force her to marry him. If a girl marries him, he won't care about the girl anymore after the novelty wears off. If the girl is lucky, she can still live if she has given birth to a son or a daughter. She'll die or become a servant if she's unlucky. A girl in our village was killed before. Her brothers went to reason with the Liu family, and in the end, the entire family was forced to death. Forced to death? That's right. They didn't rent the land to them anymore or let them go out to look for work. The problem is that local ruffians and hooligans are repeatedly making trouble for that family. So, do you know the identities of the others? The general nodded and asked. "I'm not sure, but the butler is quite respectful to them." "Yes, Butler Liu seems to be afraid of them." The general listened for a long time, but there were only 2 valuable points. One was Butler Liu's identity, and the other was that Butler Liu feared those strong men. After that, they asked the third prince for instructions. Ultimately, the third prince lets these villagers go after ordering them to keep this incident a secret. The third prince and his group did not set off the next day. Instead, they sent soldiers to town to investigate the Liu, dressed as farmers. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 4:16 Entering the capital for a reward. 10. They wouldn't have known if they hadn't investigated, but when they did, they were really shocked. On the surface, the Liu family was famous for being kind and had given out many porridge meals during every natural disaster. However, he had also done many evil deeds in private. Most of everyone here knew about it, and it wasn't just the Liu family's son doing them. The Liu family's elder and butler had relied on a great aunt of the Liu family in the capital to rob the people here of their businesses and cut off their income over the years. After the third prince received the news, he had a headache because the great aunt of the Liu family was the empress aunt. Also, the great aunt was also the wife of a second-grade official, and she wasn't someone he could simply deal with. Thus, he submitted a memorial and reported the evil deed the Liu family had done to the emperor. He later sent someone to the county government to settle the Liu family here. At the same time, the land in the village was distributed to the villagers accordingly. The messenger set off for the capital with this memorial. 5 days later, the emperor received the third prince's memorial. His expression turned ugly when he found out that the empress people had planned to assassinate the third prince. The third prince guarded the north and east of the country. What was the empress thinking by causing trouble at this time? Did she want to break the balance that he had painstakingly established? After that, he informed the empress about this matter. As for how to deal with the Liu family's great-aunt, he left it to her to do as she saw fit. When the empress found out, she cursed inwardly about the Liu family's dumbness. She also knew that she had angered the emperor this time, so she had no choice but to take away Great-Aunt Liu's mandate and ground her for a month. 10 days later, the third prince's group arrived at a large canyon and looked at the steep stone walls on both sides. Before the third prince entered the canyon, he ordered his men to stop and set up camp by a small river. He also sent people to the mountains on both sides to see if there were any ambushes. He did not believe that these assassins would attack only once. After settling down, Zhu Ying looked for Jiyu Chungrui and asked, "Should we go to the river to see if there are any fish? If there are, we can have something more substantial for our meals." Jiyu Chungrui knew that she wanted to go out and walk around. Honestly, he was also a little tired after rushing all the way. He nodded and said, "All right, let's go find the captain and ask for a basket." After saying that, the two of them went out. When he returned with a basket, he happened to bump into the third prince. After understanding his purpose, the third prince also followed them to the river. The river was wide but not deep, with the water only reaching Zhu Ying's waist. The fish inside the river could be seen with their naked eyes. The third prince looked at the small fish in the water and asked, "These fish look so small. Can they be eaten?" "It's a kind of freshwater white-striped fish. It doesn't grow big, but it's still delicious after frying them." Zhu Ying broke the stale bread left from lunch into small pieces and put them into the basket. Zhu Ying pulled off the scarf on her head, covered half of the basket, and went into the water. Seeing this, the third prince shook his head and did not speak again. Instead, he sat on a rock and looked up at the mountain. Seeing this, Zhu Ying spread her spiritual senses into the water. Sure enough, there was no bigger fish, with the biggest fish nearby being a catfish that weighed about 1 pound. She wasn't picky, so she quickly used her spiritual senses to chase the fish and prawns into her basket. Jiyu Chungrui discovered that crayfish were also by the river, so he went to the side to catch them. Zhu Ying had already caught half a basket's worth of small fish in a short while, and to prevent the third prince from noticing that something was amiss, she left the river. Although some of it escaped when she came out of the water, there were still 5 pounds of small fish and prawns. There were even a few loaches and eels mixed in, which made her smile with satisfaction. Jiyu Chungrui saw that she was carrying the basket and immediately ran over to take a look. "What a great harvest! Here, put the crayfish in the basket as well." Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 417 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 11, Crayfish, that's good stuff. It seems that the water quality in this area is not bad. Zhu Ying's eyes lit up when she saw the crayfish. Yes, and there are quite a few around. After Jiyu Chungrui finished speaking, he brought her downstream. As expected, he found a lot of crayfish and some small crabs in the cracks of the rocks. However, it was not the season for crabs, so she did not take them. Instead, she gathered many crayfish and took the opportunity to collect some for the river in her interspace. After collecting them, the husband and wife called the third prince back to the camp. After returning to the camp, they cleaned up all the fish and prawns. Zhu Ying marinated the small fish and made dried fish and dried shrimp. After washing the crayfish, she also marinated them with a spicy flavor. She left some for the young general and brought the rest back to the main camp. They waited for a while because the third prince was not present and only began eating after the third prince returned. However, The third prince only ate dried fish and even discarded the head of the fish. When Jiyu Chungrui saw this, he removed the shells of 2 crayfish and placed them on the third prince's plate. Don't just eat the small fish, this crayfish is the real delicacy. The third prince was disgusted by the strange-looking worms but was too embarrassed to say anything, so he didn't eat a single one. When he saw Jiyu Chungrui giving it to him, he wanted to reject it. But when he saw Juying eating and enjoying it until oil covered her mouth, the third prince hesitated momentarily and finally picked it up and put it in his mouth. Not only that it didn't taste bad, but it was also smooth and delicious. It wasn't inferior to any seafood Head had before. He suddenly understood why Juying, a woman, ate without caring about her image. However, he didn't know how to remove the shells of the crayfish and was too embarrassed to ask his subordinates to help him, so he continued eating only the tiny fish. Jiyu Chungrui looked at his awkward expression and was secretly amused that the third prince still cared about his image. If it were Zhu Huaiming, he would have already started snatching these crayfish. After that, he explained to the third prince where he could and couldn't eat. Since only the tails of the crayfish could be eaten in this season, it was a relatively simple explanation. After trying twice, the third prince found the trick and quickly started eating. In a short while, the large basin of crayfish was eaten up by them. Ultimately, the third prince was still unsatisfied, feeling it wasn't enough. "Third prince, when are we leaving?" Juying asked. "We'll leave early tomorrow morning. You guys should rest early tonight." After the third prince finished speaking, he asked his subordinates to clean up the bowls and went out. Seeing this, the husband and wife went to the kitchen again to get a basket. Later, they went to the river and caught more crayfish at night. Of course, the main thing was that Juying was catching them with her spiritual senses. While Jiyu Chungrui was carrying the basket on his back, he covered them with a wooden board to prevent them from running out. Not long after, a group of captains walked over with a few torches and 2 baskets on their backs. The fat kitchen chef smiled and asked, "Dr. Jiyu, can you see in the dark?" "I couldn't before, but it's much easier on my eyes with your torches." "Why? Are you all here to catch crayfish?" Jiyu Chungrui asked. "That's right. I didn't expect these water worms to be this delicious, so we came over to try catching them. If we can get many of them, we can let everyone have a taste. Let's hurry up then. Maybe we'll even strike gold and catch a big fish," Jiyu Chungrui said. When the fat chef saw this, he went down the river some distance away from the couple. He put some biscuits into one of the baskets and went straight into the water. He picked up the other basket and also started looking for prawns by the river. Seeing this, Juying deliberately used her divine sense to surge some prawns over. At the same time, she also gathered some loaches, eels, and a few medium-sized fish into the fat chef's basket that was placed in the water. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 418 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 12. An hour later, the group filled 2 baskets with prawns and crayfish and another half basket with assorted fish before stopping. They would be too far from the camp if they walked any further. After returning, Jiyu Chungrui noticed there were fewer people in the military camp. However, seeing that the captains weren't surprised, he did not ask any further. When they arrived at the kitchen, the group of people sorted out everything they had caught. At the same time, when Juying saw the fat kitchen chef gut all the eels and grind them, she asked in surprise, "Chef, are you going to cook now?" "Yeah, it's for the brothers on duty. There's finally meat to fill their stomachs," the fat kitchen chef replied. "I see, then we'll head back for now. Remember to cover the basket at night. Otherwise, if the prawns and crayfish ran away, it would be a waste." After Juying finished speaking, the couple returned to the main tent. Through the curtain, they saw that the third prince was still buried in his documents, so they went straight back into their room compartment. After lying down, Juying was about to enter her interspace when Jiyu Chungrui stopped her in a low voice. "Let's wait. I don't think it's going to be a peaceful night." Didn't you notice that there are fewer people in the camp today?" "Really? I really didn't. Is there something going on? Why didn't the third prince tell us? We're not his soldiers, so he doesn't have to tell us anything. Besides, He's in the camp too, so I don't think there's any danger. Let's just go to bed early. All right. Ju Ying replied and laid down. However, out of curiosity, she didn't fall asleep. She used her spiritual senses to probe around. Only then did she realize that there were groups of soldiers lying in ambush on both sides of the cliff. No wonder there were fewer people in camp as they had gone there. But there was nothing unusual on the mountain. She looked at the mountain road, and after confirming that nothing was out of the ordinary, she realized the third prince was overthinking things. After that, she didn't bother checking anymore. However, just as she was about to fall asleep, she heard a low flute sound in a daze. She quickly used her spiritual sense to look around and saw two triangle-headed snakes quickly crawling toward their camp. She was shocked. Although she did not know exactly what snake it was, a snake with a triangular head was definitely venomous. When she heard the strange, rhythmic flute sound, she immediately jolted. She quickly woke Jiyu Chungrue up and told him about it. Jiyu Chungrue immediately sat up when he heard that, and he just so happened to see a snake crawl in and pounce on them. He immediately grabbed a glass of water and threw it over. Alas, the snake was faster. After dodging the glass, it darted at them again. Ju Ying quickly remembered what snakes were afraid of. She knew it was wine, a wine with a high alcohol content. She immediately took out a small jar of high-proof wine and threw it at the snake's head. Although the snake managed to dodge it again, it got dizzy and couldn't get close. Sword. Jiyu Chungrue reached out his hand and asked for a sword. Ju Ying was stunned for a moment and immediately reacted. She took out a military sword she had collected previously and handed it to him. Jiyu Chungrue took it and got off the bed. He jumped at the snake and slashed horizontally. When the snake saw this, it turned around and dodged. It then lashes out and tries to bite Jiyu Chengrue's arm in a straight line. Jiyu Chungrue immediately whipped the snake with his backhand and flung it away. The snake was immediately chopped into two halves and fell to the ground, curled up, and jerked violently. At the same time, the snake's head was still staring at him, trying to bite Jiyu Chungrue. Unfortunately, without its tail, its mobility was greatly reduced. Very quickly, it was hacked to death by Jiyu Chungrue, and he quickly removed its poison sac and gall. Follow current novels on Top Novel Full. CM. Chapter 419 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 13. On the other side, the third prince had just laid down when he suddenly heard something being thrown next door. He immediately sat up and saw a black shadow crawling in. He stopped momentarily, but he quickly understood what it was. He pulled out his sword, which was hanging by the bed. However, the snake was already gone by the time he pulled out the sword. He immediately closed his eyes and listened carefully to every rustling sound in his room. Soon, he heard a faint slithering sound and knew the snake had gone under the table. He immediately opened his eyes and looked at the corner of the wall. As expected, the snake's head was exposed. He took a deep breath and quickly swung his sword down when the snake revealed a part of its body to poke its head. Although the tent was also sliced open, the snake was successfully killed. Unfortunately, the snake's head landed on the bed. The third prince had no choice but to use his sword to pick it up, but as the smell of snake blood was too unpleasant, he had no choice but to get off the bed. At that moment, Jiyu Chungrue walked over with a military sword and asked, "Third prince, are you all right?" Fortunately, the sound of something smashing woke me up. Did snakes go over there too? Yes, I had a spicy meal tonight, and my throat felt uncomfortable. I woke up to drink a glass of water and was surprised to see a venomous snake crawling in. Venomous snake. The third prince immediately realized that something was wrong when he heard this. Ignoring the fact that the snakes were supposed to be hibernating, venomous snakes were rarely seen in the north. How could they have approached their camp? Besides, the camp's perimeter had been sprayed with insect and animal repellent. Jiyu Chungrue looked at his expression and knew that he had realized the same thing. He reminded him, "Did you hear the flute outside before the snake came in?" Hearing his reminder, the third prince recalled that he had indeed heard it. However, the sound was faint, and if it weren't for the particular rhythm, it would have been difficult to tell that it was the sound of a flute. Be on your guard for tonight. I'll go out and make some arrangements. After the third prince said that, he put on his clothes and turned around to walk out. You be careful too. Jiyu Chungrui returned to his room and asked Ju Ying for a handful of mothballs. He handed them to the third prince and said, "This thing has a strong smell and can be used to repel snakes." The third prince nodded and took them. He put one in his boots and one in his pockets, carried his sword, and walked out. Jiyu Chungrui removed the second snake venom sac and gallbladder before returning to the main tent. On the other hand, Ju Ying used her spiritual senses to check the camp area carefully. After confirming that there were no more snakes, she began to look for the person who had played the flute. If she guessed correctly, the sound of that flute controlled the two snakes. Soon, on the left side of the mountain, she found a black man running away into the mountains. Ju Ying's eyes turned cold, and she used her spiritual senses to assault his consciousness, rendering him retarded. She saw him run around and fall off the cliff, throwing himself to his death. When Jiyu Chungrui returned, he saw that her little face hardened. He immediately went forward and asked, "Did something happen again?" Ju Ying shook her head and told him about tracking that person. "I originally wanted to spare his life, but who knew he would end up this way? Maybe it's backlash from his karma. Since the third prince is the one heaven chooses to be the next emperor, those who oppose him will not have a good ending. You are becoming more and more superstitious. There's an actual goddess by my side. I don't see how I can't be superstitious. You better take good care of that goddess." Of course. After that, they both waited for the third prince. After confirming that there was nothing more in camp, they finally went to sleep. The following day, after breakfast, the group set off again. It wasn't until they successfully passed through the canyon that the soldiers on both sides went down the mountain to meet up with them. Follow current novels on Top Novelful. CM. Chapter 420 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 14. Following that, the husband and wife discovered that the closer they got to the capital, the more cautious the third prince became. Fortunately, there were no more accidents. Just as they were about to reach the capital, the third prince sent someone to deliver a letter to the emperor before increasing their traveling speed. Early one morning, the third prince changed into clean clothes and continued their journey to the capital. When they passed a forest, they suddenly heard a woman scream from afar. It was a scream, but they could discern she had a lovely voice, like a singer. More importantly, Jiyu Chungrui felt that this voice was somewhat familiar, so he stopped the carriage and said, "Third prince, do you want me to go over and see what's going on?" "Go ahead." The third prince hesitated momentarily before waving his hand and asking two soldiers to follow. Jiyu Chungrui took his first aid kit and brought two soldiers over. When they reached the foot of a mountain, they saw a scholar standing near a woman with his back to them. He didn't want to go over at first, but he wanted to see who this woman was and why he felt her voice was familiar. Therefore, he walked over. However, he was enraged when he saw the scholar undoing the girl's clothes with a perverted expression. Fortunately, it was winter, and the girl wore extra clothes. Otherwise, thinking of this, Jiyu Chungrui rushed forward and kicked the scholar to the side. He roared, "Are you even a scholar? A dog has better ethics than you. Who are you?" "I'm saving her." The scholar fell to the ground and looked at the three with a flustered expression. At the same time, he pushed himself back up with both hands. "You're telling me you're saving her with what you're doing? Can't one check her wounds? There's so much blood on her forehead, and you." When Jiyu Chungrui said this, the scholar got up and turned to run. Jiyu Chungrui immediately turned to the two soldiers and asked, "Sorry to trouble you too." After saying that, he immediately checked the girl's head. Fortunately, it was only a superficial wound and did not hurt her skull. He stopped the bleeding and bandaged it quickly. When the blood on her face was cleaned, Jiyu Chungrui was stunned when he saw the thin and delicate oval face. If he remembered correctly, this girl was the eldest daughter of his aunt, with her name being Yang Waning. Ju Ying, afraid of Jiyu Chungrui getting accused of sexual harassment, walked over and saw him staring at the girl's face in a daze. She asked curiously, "Do you know her?" If I remember correctly, she's a cousin from the Yang family. Jiyu Chongrue nodded. What a coincidence. Let's carry her back before treating her so the third prince won't have to wait too long. Alright, 111 check if there's any fracture. Jiyu Chongrue first took her pulse and confirmed there were no internal injuries or fractures before doing anything else. He helped her up onto Ju Ying's back, and the two soldiers finally caught the scholar. Tell me, who ordered you to ruin this lady's reputation? Jiyu Chongrue demanded immediately. What do you mean? I don't know what you're talking about. Although the scholar panicked, he still pretended to be calm and replied. Seeing this, Jiyu Chongrue knew he could not quickly get anything out of him, but he could not let the third prince wait too long. He said to the two soldiers, let's bring him back and interrogate him properly at the camp. After saying that, he stuffed a large pebble into the scholar's mouth. When the scholar saw this, he panicked and desperately shook his head. However, Jiyu Chongrue ignored him and chased after Ju Ying. Chapter 421 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 15. The third prince noticed Yang Wanning, who was dressed luxuriously, and the detained scholar being carried on Ju Ying's back. Dr. Jiyu, what's going on? He asked Jiyu Chongrue. Jiyu Chongrue did not hide anything and told him everything he had seen and done. The third prince understood what was happening and knew this was a dispute between women. It was just difficult to identify the woman who was plotting all of this. He looked at the scholar and said coldly, a scholar, yet a scourge. Just kill him. When the soldier holding the scholar raised his sword, the scholar was so terrified that he peed his pants. He would have collapsed on the ground if he hadn't been propped up forcefully. Just when he thought he was going to die, Yang Wanning, who was on Ju Ying's back, woke up. After understanding what happened, she said, Third prince, please spare his life. You too. Jiyu Chongrue looked at her in surprise. He can't die yet. Otherwise, he won't be able to testify for his crimes. After Yang Wanning finished speaking, she fainted again. All right, drag him back. Seeing this, the third prince knew she had decided, so he did not interfere and ordered the convoy to continue their journey. Ju Ying saw this and immediately carried Yang Wanning back to the carriage while Jiyu Chongrue got on after them. As for the scholar, he was tied up and dragged forward by the soldiers like a dog. Around noon, they finally arrived outside the capital. The person who welcomed them was Eunuch Li. When he saw them arrive, he immediately approached them and greeted them. Welcome back, third prince. Eunuch Li, please, get up. One wonder what father intended with these sweet potatoes. The third prince got off the carriage and helped him up. The emperor intends to let me store the seeds in the imperial manor for now. After planting a batch, we will spread the seeds near the capital. Thus, these seeds don't need to enter the royal palace. I'll leave them to Eunuch Li. The third prince nodded. After saying that, he picked 10 elite soldiers and said to the rest of the brothers, bring the sweet potatoes to the imperial manor and have a good rest there. 111 Inform more specific arrangements tomorrow morning. Yes. The general immediately nodded. When the third prince saw this, he asked Jiyu Chongrue to explain in detail to Eunuch Li how to grow and preserve the sweet potatoes. It would be troublesome if it froze due to the cold weather. At the same time, he also sent 2 soldiers to detain the scholar at a manor in the suburbs. After explaining everything clearly, the third prince brought Jiyu Chongrue, Ju Ying, and 10 elite soldiers back to his royal residence. Ju Huaiming, who was waiting at the entrance, saw them and greeted them with a smile. You guys have finally arrived. Brother Ju, you are here. Jiyu Chongrue smiled and greeted him. Yeah, I just returned. I heard you were coming to the capital, so I rushed back early to meet you. It's indeed been a while. We have to have a good drink later. As for the third prince, he first asked the head butler to call 2 women over after he got off the carriage. One carried Yang Wanning, while the other helped Ju Ying carry her luggage to the guest courtyard. Cousin, help me entertain our guest. One need to change my clothes and head to the palace. Don't worry, I'll take good care of them. Ju Huaiming quickly replied. After saying that, All of them entered the courtyard residence. However, they separated after a fork. The third prince went straight to the central courtyard at the third entrance, while Zhu Huaiming brought Jiyu Chungrui and Zhu Ying to the guest courtyard at the second entrance. Chapter 422 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 16. After settling down, Zhu Huaiming looked at Zhu Ying and asked, "Who is the girl you brought back?" Jiyu Chungrui didn't hide anything and roughly explained what had happened. Looking at her appearance, she should be the daughter of the Minister of Revenue, Yang Wanning, who is also my cousin. However, I'm not sure after not seeing her for a few years, so we'll have to wait until she wakes up to confirm if it's true. When Zhu Huaiming heard him mention the Yang family, he hesitated and said, "Your aunt is gone." "Gone?" Jiyu Chungrui looked at him in astonishment. However, he soon felt relieved. He just smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. "You just arrived in the capital, so take your rest for now. 111 tell you in detail after dinner." "Alright, let's talk later." After Jiyu Chungrui finished speaking, he stood up and sent him out. Coincidentally, the servants had also finished preparing hot water. The couple bathed and changed into clean clothes before heading to the dining room. Zhu Huaiming was already waiting outside. When he saw them come out, he immediately ordered the dishes to be served. "After traveling for so long, do you want some wine to relieve your fatigue?" "Just some." Jiyu Chungrui thought of the Yang family's matter they had to discuss and agreed to his suggestion. Zhu Huaiming saw this and asked someone to bring a small jar of white wine and fruit wine. The food was quite sumptuous. There was a large plate of beef ribs, a braised carp, a plate of stir-fried cabbage, a plate of sweet and sour shredded radish, and a plate of steamed buns served with egg soup. Zhu Huaiming asked someone to pour the wine as soon as the dishes were served. "The year hasn't been kind to us, so there's a limit to what we can get. Please don't mind the food." "That's not true. It already looks great. Let's have a toast." Jiyu Chungrui shook his head at his words. "Sister, let's drink together. It's been a long time since the three of us drank together." Zhu Huaiming said to Zhu Ying. "Sure, one toast to brother Zhu's happiness." Zhu Ying raised her glass after hearing that. "Haha, alright, let's do it." Zhu Huaiming raised his glass as well. After a glass of wine, he knew they were hungry, so he didn't persuade them to drink more. Instead, he picked up a piece of beef rib and said, "Try the cooking skills of the chefs in this manner." Zhu Ying took a bite and said, "To be honest, it's quite good, but just that it's a little salty for my taste." Zhu Huaiming nodded. "That's true. I'll mention it to them later. I will get them to put less salt in your food. There's no need for that. We won't be staying for long anyway. Even if it's just a meal, let's have it served the best it can be. Don't worry, it's not that troublesome." After Zhu Huaiming finished speaking, he served them some food. After dinner, Jiyu Chungrui asked, "Brother Zhu, do you know how my aunt died?" "When did this happen?" "It is said that she died of illness during the snowstorm. Later, one sent people to investigate and discovered that your aunt fell ill after the Jiyu family was raided. She didn't make it during the snowstorm because the weather was too cold, and there was a lack of doctors and medicine." Jiyu Chungrui was so angry that he laughed after hearing that. The wife of a dignified second-grade official lacked medicine. What kind of precious medicinal herbs would that have to be? Zhu Huaiming heard his sarcastic laughter and knew he didn't believe this. At that time, he did not believe it either. However, the capital was trapped during the snowstorm, and everyone knew this. Therefore, it was difficult to determine whether this tragedy was man-made or caused by a lack of medicine. He didn't hide anything and told him what he had found. Jiyu Chungrui couldn't judge the truth after hearing Zhu Huaiming's findings. However, he was sure that his aunt had been bullied. "My mother didn't die from a lack of medicine. She froze to death." Yang Wanning walked in with an old woman's help and spoke up. Chapter 423 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 17. Jiyu Chungrui was stunned momentarily, as he didn't expect Yang Wanning to wake up this quickly. He quickly asked, "Is there anywhere you are feeling uncomfortable?" Apart from the dizziness, I'm fine. Yang Wanning bowed and said, "Thank you, cousin, for saving me. It's nothing much. Come, have a seat. The dizziness is because you got hit by a rock. You'll be fine after resting for 2 days." Jiyu Chungrui explained. The old woman immediately helped Yang Wanning sit on a stool at the side. "Miss Yang has an injury on her head. Get the kitchen to prepare something light," Zhu Huaiming said to the old woman. "Yes." The old woman responded and turned to leave. Jiyu Chungrui then asked, "Cousin, you just said that Auntie froze to death. What's with that?" Yang Wanning lowered her head and clenched her fists. "After the incident with the Jiyu family, my mother did get anxious and fell ill once. It was also from then on that her status in the family lowered. However, she only fell ill because of the cold. In the winter of the year before last, it was especially cold after a snowfall. There wasn't enough charcoal going around, so the charcoal for the 3 of us was cut off. In less than 2 days, my mother, at the same time, Zhu Ying, who had been observing her with her spiritual senses, found a bone-deep hatred and killing intent in Yang Waning's eyes, which made her scalp tingle. It seemed that this cousin-in-law of hers wasn't that simple a person. Who was in charge of the Yang family at that time? Jiyu Chungrui asked after a moment of silence. "My grandmother, Madame Kui, and her niece, Mrs. Kui. Mrs. Chue is the concubine who gave birth to the eldest son? Yes, she's the main wife now. What do you plan to do next?" Jiyu Chungrui nodded and asked. Although they were technically related to the Yang family as in-laws, they were of the younger generation. In addition, the Jiyu family was still guilty of their crimes, so they couldn't interfere in the Yang family's affairs. Besides, he didn't want to care too much about this. Therefore, whether or not they live a good life depends on the siblings' intentions. If the siblings wanted to resist, Jiyu Chungrui didn't mind helping them. Otherwise, he did not need to stir up trouble for them. "Do you have my mother's dowry list?" Yang Wanning raised her head and asked. Jiyu Chungrui paused for a moment and shook his head. "No, but there shouldn't be any at home. Otherwise, your grandmother and the others wouldn't have not mentioned it." "I understand." Yang Wanning nodded in disappointment. After a while, the old woman came in with a bowl of chicken soup noodles and handed it to Yang Wanning, saying, "Miss Yang, please." "Thank you, Granny Ma." Yang Wanning turned her head and thanked her. "You guys can chat first. If the 3 of you need anything, feel free to mention it to Granny Ma. We'll have roast meat for dinner tonight." Zhu Huaiming stood up and said, "Okay, we just happened to bring some seasoning with us. You just need to prepare the meat, oven, and skewers." Jiyu Chungrui sent him off after that. Granny Ma saw this and immediately cleared the bowls and chopsticks off the table before leaving. Only then did Yang Wanning pick up her chopsticks and eat her noodles. She looked at Zhu Ying, who was drinking tea, and said, "You must be my 3rd cousin's wife. Thank you for taking care of me all the way here. You're too polite." Zhu Ying shook her head and asked, "What's the matter today that you must travel into the wilderness?" "The Mother Goddess temple is on the mountain over there. I followed my grandmother to the mountain yesterday to offer incense. This morning, my 2nd sister suggested I go hunting in the mountains. It was just unexpected that this would be a trap. She wants you to marry that scholar." "Yes, half a month ago, the emperor issued an imperial decree for selecting consorts for the 3rd, 4th, and 7th princes. The eldest daughter of a 2nd-grade official or above is required to participate, and I'm the eldest daughter of the Yang family, so." Chapter 424 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 18, Zhu Ying spoke up. "The 3rd prince has arranged to have that scholar held at his manor. If you need him, you can tell me in advance." "Sure. By the way, why did you 2 follow the 3rd prince back to the capital?" "The sweet potatoes were originally planted with seeds we dug up from the mountains. Therefore, we returned to the capital to receive a reward." Yang Waning's eyes lit up after hearing that, but she did not ask any more questions. Coincidentally, Jiyu Chungrui walked in, so Yang Wanning stood up and said, cousin sister-in-law, I'll have to trouble you to thank the 3rd prince on my behalf. I'll need to return home now. We'll contact each other again at a later date. The injury on your head is quite severe. Can you just go back? Jiyu Chongrue asked. Even if I can't, I have to. If I don't go back now, rumors might spread. I'll give you some medicine for you to bring back. Remember to change your bandages frequently when you return home. When Jiyu Chongrue heard her say that, he did not try to persuade her to stay. Instead, he returned to his room to get a medicine bottle and handed it to her. You're a doctor now? Yang Wanning asked after taking the bottle of medicine. Yes, after returning to my hometown, I was forced to make a living and chose to become a doctor. That's great to hear. Alright, I'll take my leave. I'll send you back. After Jiyu Chongrue finished speaking, he brought her out. He found his horse carriage and sent her back to her residence. After they left, Ju Ying turned around and went back to the bedroom. She lay down and stretched before falling asleep. When Jiyu Chongrue returned, she was already asleep and snoring. He tried not to disturb her, seeing that she had fallen into a deep sleep. Instead, he took a blanket and napped on the soft couch at the side. On the other side, the third prince had changed his clothes and was just in time for the emperor's mealtime after entering the palace. When the emperor saw him enter, he immediately waved his hand and beckoned him over, saying, "Great that you came at such a nice time. Come, accompany me for a meal." "Yes, father." After the third prince finished speaking, he walked over and ate with him. After the meal, the emperor asked, "Did the journey go smoothly?" The third prince hesitated for a moment before deciding to say it. He wanted to paint a target on the person behind the scenes. He also wanted to let the emperor know that someone couldn't wait to take his life and was thinking about the throne under him. "It's all right," he said. "One just encountered something strange when one passed by the canyon." "Strange? How strange?" "I was afraid of being ambushed, so one set up camp near the canyon one night. At night, a low flute whistled as two venomous snakes crawled into my tent. If Jiyu Chongrue hadn't woken up to drink a glass of water that night, we would have been bitten and died to those snakes." Venomous snakes. The emperor was furious after hearing this. If he remembered correctly, only a few people in the southwest knew such snake-taming techniques. Southwest. Could it be his eldest son? But what if? "Do you know who did it?" he asked. "I'm not sure. I didn't catch anyone." The third prince shook his head. The emperor nodded after hearing this. "You're not young anymore. I'll arrange a small consort selection banquet in 3 days. You and your brothers can decide on your main consorts then. At the same time, you and your uncle will be rewarded according to your achievements." "Thank you, father. One will heed your arrangements." "Oh, right. Will the Jiyu husband and wife come together?" the third prince asked. "How's the situation with the Jiyu family now?" the emperor asked. The third prince knew the emperor had people in Yunhe County, so he did not hide anything. He also added in and told him about the general situation of the Jiyu family. "I didn't expect them to be this capable. Also, one heard that the Jiyu family's third son and his wife have a manor and restaurant under them, right?" the emperor asked. Chapter 425 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 18. "Yes, do you still remember the larceny of military rations 3 years ago?" the third prince asked. "Of course, I remember. Your eldest brother's men did it. If you hadn't found out in time, your Dongyang Navy would have starved that winter. At that time, Zhu Huaiming was the one who escorted the rations. He was on guard but never expected a traitor from the inside. He almost lost his life at that time. It was Jiyu Chongrue who discovered and saved him. Otherwise, the grass on his grave would have been overgrown by now. A scholar like him sure has the guts, huh?" At the time, he was also backed into a corner due to unforeseen circumstances. A wealthy family from the Qiao clan nearby was also among those robbing the grain. Their family had grudges against the Jiyu family, so they had been suppressing the Jiyu family after they returned to the point where they did not even have the chance to go out and work. Later, the elder of the Qiao family fixed his gaze on his wife and the stewed recipe they devised. He was powerless to resist and could only think of ways to find the Qiao family's weakness, so he constantly kept tabs on the Qiao family. When he learned they had taken action that night, he followed them. On his way home, he met Zhu Huaiming, who was near death. He also learned some medical skills, which is why Zhu Huaiming lived to tell the tale. Zhu Huaiming would not have been able to hide from a large-scale search otherwise. Thus, Zhu Huaiming later bought a manor and a restaurant with his own money and gave them to them. The couple didn't take it for granted either. They gave Hongyun Restaurant the recipe for braised pork, which we greatly appreciated. I didn't expect this kid to have some guts. Oh, right. How are his medical skills? The emperor nodded and asked. I heard he learned a little from the academy's doctor and was able to treat some minor illnesses at first. He later learned a lot from a local doctor. From the looks of it, he can treat all common illnesses as long as they aren't rare diseases. The emperor nodded and then looked at the third prince. Ever since the incident with the Zhu family, his son had stopped smiling and become pitifully quiet. He didn't expect the third prince to be this talkative today. It was obvious that he had a good impression of Jiyu Chungrui. How do you think we should reward the Jiyu family this time? The emperor asked. I'm also sure you're aware that they invented the water wheel. My eldest and fourth brothers were the only ones who raised a fuss and demanded that we give credit to the Chen family instead. They had also given their full support to promote the white sweet potatoes. Especially since they were the ones who discovered the technique to cultivate white sweet potatoes, one feel they should be exempted from their crimes. As for the reward, that is secondary. Does that mean the white sweet potatoes were already ready when we knew of them? They began planting the sweet potatoes the year before one sent you the sweet potatoes, the second year after they returned to the countryside. However, because seeds were scarce then, they only began planting them in large numbers in the village a year later. After that, the father and son chatted for a while about court matters before the third prince took his leave. On the other hand, Madame Kui asked for Yang Wanning after she returned home and questioned her, "Where did you go? The people I sent to look for you disappeared at the foot of the hill. Did you do something shameful?" Yang Wanning clenched her fists after hearing that. She looked up and replied with a firm expression, "Grandmother, this concerns the reputation of the four of us. Don't listen to those slanderous words. We must put an end to it as soon as possible. If word gets out, we will not only be unable to participate in the selection of the imperial consort, but we will also offend the third prince." What does it have to do with the third prince? Because the third prince saved me after I fell down. Chapter 426 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 19. What? The third prince saved you? Madame Kui exclaimed. After that, she looked at her with a complicated gaze. The expression on her face also changed, just like in an opera performance. It was interesting, to say the least. Yang Wanning was overjoyed when she saw this. You didn't expect it, did you? After all the scheming, you actually helped me out. You must be vomiting internally. Yang Wanning thought to herself. However, she could not understand why she did not expect to meet the third prince in her previous life. There was no such thing as promoting sweet potatoes, and the Jiyu family went radio silent after returning to the countryside. Could something have happened? Or was it because of her regression? She didn't have a clue, and this wasn't the time to think about it. She continued, "Yes, but to be precise, I was saved by my third cousin and his wife, who followed the third prince to the capital." Third cousin? Madame Kui was stunned for a moment. But, the Kui family had yet to come to the capital recently. She thought of something and asked in disbelief, "The Jiyu family, aren't they guilty? How can they be by the third prince's side?" Yang Wanning replied with some fake surprise, "I'm not sure about the details. It could be because third cousin's medical skills are not bad, as he was the one who bandaged my head." She was familiar with the Yang family's personality. They exemplified bullying the weak and fearing the strong. They would only make a move once they understood the depth of the Jiyu family. Madame Kui would not make things difficult for her and her brother before more information was gathered. This would give Yang Wanning time to assess the situation and figure out what had happened in her previous life before launching a counterattack. Of course, it would be preferable if the Jiyu family could recover or have their crimes pardoned if they couldn't. This way, her participation in the consort election would be unaffected. Madame Kui did not ask any more questions after hearing this. Instead, she waved her hand and told her to return to her room. In the afternoon, Zhu Huaiming brought the mutton and barbecue tools over, and they called for 3 servants to skewer the meat. After the skewers were done, Zhu Huaiming went to call the third prince over. There was also a young man in his 30s who wore luxurious clothes and had a firm expression. After Zhu Huaiming returned, he introduced them to each other. Only then did Zhu Ying and her husband learn that this was the butler's eldest son and the third prince's godbrother, Feng Chun. He currently manages all of the third prince's private property. Dr. Jiyu, Lady Jiyu, if you need anything from me, just let me know. Feng Chun stepped forward and greeted them. Of course. If you need my help, don't hesitate as well. Jiyu Chungrue returned the greeting. All right, now that we know each other, let's quickly sit down and start the barbecue. Zhu Huaiming said. After saying that, he walked straight to the grill and grabbed the skewers to barbecue them. When Jiyu Chungrue saw this, he helped smash some charcoal for preparation. After a while, Zhu Ying handed many cooked skewers to Zhu Huaiming and said, Brother Zhu, you guys eat first. 111 cook. All right, well take your place later. After Zhu Huaiming finished speaking, he took the skewer into the dining room and placed it on the table. Hurry up and eat while it's hot. It won't taste good if it gets cold. After saying that, he took a skewer and started eating. It's still the same. Fragrant, fresh, and tender. It's amazing. As for the third prince and Feng Chun, they shook their heads when they saw his gluttonous appearance. However, they soon succumbed to the temptation and could not stop eating. Jiyu Chungrue helped to light some charcoal. After the second batch of skewers was ready, he carried it into the house. Seeing this, Zhu Ying felt they had enough to eat for a while, so she roasted the lamb leg. At the same time, she called over 3 women to help them roast more. Once the lamb leg was ready, the 4 men in the dining room were almost full. Zhu Ying and the 3 women cooked while they ate. At the same time, she started chatting with them. Chapter 427 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 20. What she didn't expect was that the third prince wasn't married. He was sure an anomaly in the royal family. At the same time, she also learned that Butler Feng currently handled the third prince's residence. Inside a fake mountain outside the kitchen, Xiao Lanlan looked at the person in front of her with a face full of surprise and joy. They are here. Can I make a move now? On the opposite end was a man dressed like a servant. He looked around vigilantly and said, No, Master said you can't be exposed yet. He also wants me to remind you that Jiyu Chungrue has no feelings for you. If you spoil his plans, he won't forgive you. I know. I've gave up on him a long time ago. Xiao Lanlan nodded and asked, So, what instructions does Master have? No, for the moment. Your mission is to use all kinds of soups to sterilize the third prince's wife. Don't worry about anything else. Remember, don't act on your own. Otherwise, if you're recognized, no one can save you. I understand. Although Xiao Lanlan was unwilling, she still nodded. The servant looked at her reluctant expression and pinched her chin. Remember what I said. Someone will deal with Jiyu Chungrue and his wife, but it can't be you. Understood. Xiao Lanlan nodded. The servant saw that she had listened to him and quietly left. Xiao Lanlan, on the other hand, was so pissed that she raised her leg and kicked the fake mountain walls. She grimaced in pain. However, this also reminded her. She still decided to give Zhu Ying a sterilization drug and couldn't wait to see how long Jiyu Chungrue could still be in love with her. She had to find the right time or be in big trouble. Zhu Ying and Jiyu Chungrue finally entered the interspace together again at night. After Jiyu Chungrue went to work, Zhu Ying started dealing with the demands of her believers, especially those requesting to cure their diseases by giving them medicine. Finally, she checked on Yang Wanning. Soon, she found something was amiss. She noticed young Wanning was plagued by bad luck, and although hatred was in her eyes, it was not strong. Her eyes looked relatively clean and pure of revenge. This was different from when she saw her during the day. The hatred and killing intent in her eyes were as sharp as a sword. Ju Ying also noticed a deep sadness and longing in her eyes occasionally. Was she hiding it well before, or? Thinking of this, she followed the faith and found young Wanning sitting in a daze in her room. There was a picture on the table in front of her, and drawn on it were some of the people around her. Ju Ying's gaze stopped on the scholar because there was a label on him. Husband. In other words, they would get married. Thinking back to her cold attitude towards the scholar during the day and her words about how the scholar was still valuable, she suddenly had a thought. Was young Wanning a regressor? If that were the case, this would be interesting. This meant they could quickly confirm whether the third prince was the next emperor through Yang Wanning. It would be fine if it were, but she would have to consider her next moves seriously if it weren't. After leaving her side, Ju Ying went to Madame Kui. Madame Kui asked a handsome and scholarly young man, "Son, you have to investigate what's going on with the Jiyu family. Why would they enter the capital? If the Jiyu family finds out the cause of their aunt's death, we'll be in big trouble. I'll investigate this. As for the cause of Mrs. Gus' death, you don't have to worry. I've already dealt with it, and they won't find anything. Are you sure there's no trail left behind?" "Yes, other than Jinhua, no one else knows. I don't think she's stupid enough to tell anyone." Chapter 428 Entering the Capital for a Reward, 21, Good. Find out why the third son of the Jiyu family is here as soon as possible. Got it. Mother, you go to bed early. I still have official documents to deal with. Through their conversation, Ju Ying quickly confirmed that this man was the Minister of Revenue, Yang Shicheng. She thought to herself that this man sure took good care of himself. She would have thought he was only in his 30s if she didn't know that he was almost 40. She thought of the dowry list that young Wanning had mentioned before. She immediately searched Madame Kui's house. Sure enough, a dowry list was on the wall in a small secret compartment. She hesitated momentarily, tried to see if she could take it out, and was surprised to see she had succeeded. She opened the booklet in her hand and read it. She got envious after reading it. On it were 5 shops, 2 villages, and a residence. There was also jewelry, cloth, calligraphy, antiques, ornaments, porcelain, and more. Ju Ying closed it and muttered, "No wonder ancient weddings were said to have 10 miles of red dresses. It's sure scary. No wonder the Jiyu family was targeted. Their raid probably filled up more than half of the national treasury." After looking at it, she took it and returned to the villa. She made a copy of it before putting it back in the safe. Ju Ying then turned around and went to work. Later, she handed the photocopied list to Jiyu Chungrue and said, "Take a look at this. This is the dowry list of your aunt. One just don't know how we should deal with this. What a ridiculous list of dowries. It's a pity that even this many things haven't fed them enough." Jiyu Chungrue sighed. He added, "The handwriting on this is second uncle's. I'll write a letter back later. If there's a copy on their end, I'll ask them to send it over. Otherwise, well, just create one and fake it. Alright, send a letter to Uncle Liu as well so that this isn't leaked." "I will. I hope this can help the siblings." "Right, I suspect that young Wanning is a regressor." Ju Ying told him what she found today. "Regressor? You mean she returned here from the future?" "Yes, I heard from her that the emperor plans to choose concubines for the few princes. It might be because of this that someone is plotting against her. Her stepmother, that's right. Young Wanning is the eldest daughter of the Yang family. It looks like we've caught up in something fun. There's going to be a good show." "Yeah, but we must be careful if we get dragged in. In addition, be more careful from now on. I feel that Lord Yang will investigate us and the Jiyu family. Don't worry, he won't be able to make it in time. The third prince said that the concubine selection banquet will be held in the afternoon 3 days from now. It will also be the rewarding ceremony. Jiyu Chungrui paused and continued, "Oh right, the third emperor said that someone would come tomorrow morning to tailor our clothes. So, he told us not to head out tomorrow morning." "All right." Ju Ying nodded. To avoid causing trouble for the third prince, they stayed in residence for the next 2 days. They sightsee the vast residence, and Ju Ying started learning palace etiquette from the old women. The Yang family, on the other hand, was not as peaceful. Madame Kui and her nephew, including Yang Wanyu, the Yang family's second daughter, had devised a plan with the guards to prevent Yang Wanning from participating in the selection. Yang Wanning, who had planned it, had avoided their sly schemes. Instead, she replaced Qing Dao, one of Mrs. Kui's maidservants, as the one who fell victim to the trap. In the end, with the scholar in her hands as a hostage, Lord Yang finally allowed her to participate in the consort selection. However, he had not prepared any appropriate clothing or jewelry for her. She also had no money, so she had no choice but to ask the couple for assistance. Chapter 429 Palace Banquet 1. Ju Huiming, who happened to be eating in the manor, heard Yang Waning's request from her maidservant and said speechlessly, "Minister Yang is getting increasingly shameless. If it weren't for the support of the Jiyu family, he wouldn't be where he is today. Now, he's actively bullying his own child. How shameless." As he spoke, his anger grew. Because this made him think of the current emperor. Back then, it was also because of Ju Huiming's grandfather's support that the current emperor could ascend to the throne. However, as soon as his throne was secured, he began to settle accounts with the Ju family and caused the death of his aunt. If not for the Empress Dowager's conscience and the fact that the northern borderline couldn't live without his father, their entire family, including the third prince, would have long become a pile of bones. After the third prince heard his anger, he only silently glanced at him and did not say anything. Jiyu Chungrui didn't overthink it after hearing that. Instead, he told Chun Shi, "Go back and tell your young miss that we will help her prepare clothes and jewelry, but when she goes out tomorrow, she should wear the clothes the Yang family prepared for her. Letting everyone know about the Yang family's discrimination would be best. When the banquet officially begins, we'll send the clothes for her to change into." "Thank you, young master. I will take my leave." Chun Shi responded and left. The third prince thought of Yang Wanning, who shared the same fate as her, and was afraid that this servant girl would have an accident on the way. He called a secret guard and said, "Send Chun Shi back in secret. Wait for her to safely return to Miss Yang's side before returning." "Aye." The secret guard responded and turned to leave. "Thank you, third prince." Jiyu Chungrui said. "It's nothing." The third prince shook his head. "I'll get the butler to arrange the clothes and jewelry. Don't worry about it." "All right, but we will pay for this." Jiyu Chungrui said. "Sure. When it's done, I'll get the butler to give you the bill." The third prince hesitated momentarily, but he finally nodded when he thought of his and Yang Waning's reputations. After returning to the interspace at night, Jiyu Chungrui said, "Babe, when you're done with your work, see how Yang Wanning is doing. I hope she stays safe." "You're really concerned about her?" Ju Ying looked at him in surprise. "If she's really a regressor, it means she is a person with a destiny or mission. We'll help her whenever we can, as we might need her help in the future." Jiyu Chungrui paused and continued, "But it depends on her ability. If she can't take on the responsibility, just keep her safe." Ju Ying nodded. "All right. By the way, it's time to harvest the rice fields. Remember to come and help me with it after you're done." "Got it. I'll go over to my end first." After Jiyu Chungrui finished speaking, he turned around and went to the other side of the river. After Ju Ying fulfilled all her believers' requests that she could, she went to look for Yang Wanning again. At that moment, Yang Wanning was memorizing a poem intently. Beside her was an exquisite purse she had made herself, and she got ready for dance practice after memorizing the poem. Only when it was almost midnight did she lie down on the bed and fall asleep. At this moment, Ju Ying also realized that the new clothes under Yang Wanning's blanket were dark purple dresses. Be it the color or the style, it wasn't suitable for a young lady to wear. It seemed that Madame Kui and her nephew weren't smart. If Yang Wanning wore these clothes, wouldn't they also be putting themselves to shame? It was an unnecessary double-edged sword. When Zhu Ying turned to look at Madame Chue, she was already asleep. She didn't appear to be sleeping well and was constantly muttering. She seemed to have done a lot of bad things. Chapter 430 Palace Banquet 2. In the end, Mrs. Kui stopped at Yang Wanu's room and instructed her on some things that she should pay attention to tomorrow. What surprised Zhu Ying was that their target was not to be the third prince's main consort but the first prince's secondary consort. However, she realized this was to be expected when she remembered that Lord Yang had sided with the first prince. Just as Mrs. Kui was about to leave after giving her instructions, Yang Wanu suddenly said, "Mother, are we really able to stop that little slut from participating in the consort selection tomorrow? Don't worry, the Empress is also unwilling to see her. Tomorrow, not only will one stop her from attending the banquet, but one will also be destroying her reputation." "Really? That's great. With the Empress stepping in, her life is ruined. Who told her she doesn't know what's good for her? She clearly had the option of marrying into a proper and wealthy family, but she insisted on climbing the high branches and pretending to be a phoenix. We don't have any other choices than to show her what it means to be inferior to a chicken." Zhu Ying shook her head after hearing this. It was uncertain who would be unlucky tomorrow because she found that bad luck was rapidly shrouding both the mother and daughter. After she finished her work in her interspace, Zhu Ying told Jiyu Chungrui of the mother and daughter plotting against Yang Wanning. "We must be careful tomorrow in case the Empress or the first prince's people find trouble with us." "Yeah, and the Zhu family. They might not be nice to you as well." No. Since they sold my original self back then in exchange for some betrothal gift, it's equivalent to breaking off our blood relationship. If they come to me for something, I won't hesitate to humiliate them." "Okay, be careful. Try not to come into contact with them." After lunch the next day, Zhu Ying reviewed the court etiquette under the supervision of the older women. After making sure that there were no mistakes, the couple followed the third prince and Zhu Huaiming to the palace. The two of them first followed them to Longevity Palace to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager. When the Empress Dowager learned that the couple was from the Jiyu family, she was momentarily surprised before asking with a smile, "Do take a seat. Is your grandmother well?" "Empress Dowager, my grandmother's health is doing well. She even told me to greet you properly, given a chance to meet you." Good. It's good that she's healthy." The Empress Dowager smiled. Then, her gaze fell on Zhu Ying, and she said, "You must be the little girl from the Zhu family. I see you are not only beautiful but also elegant in your craft." It's no wonder Ping Yang chose you back then at first glance. "Thank you for your kindness, Empress Dowager." Zhu Ying stepped forward and bowed. "Haha, you're quite the gallant girl. Not bad. The Empress Dowager laughed when she saw that Zhu Ying had no humble attitude toward her other than respect. To be honest, not to mention the imperial madams, even the Empress was careful when speaking before her. She hadn't expected that a daughter of a concubine who had not been favored since she was young would be so undaunted before her. She sized Zhu Ying up. Besides her outstanding looks, Empress Dowager also noticed Zhu Ying's excellent temperament. Although she didn't have the aura of a noble daughter, she gave off the feeling of a saint that could only be looked up to. However, Zhu Ying gave off a friendly and easygoing feeling instead of an overbearing holy aura. It was a conflicted feeling, but the Empress Dowager had to admit Zhu Ying was an outstanding person. "Quickly, come to my side. Let me take a good look at you." Although Zhu Ying was a little reluctant, she responded and slowly walked over. However, she didn't go directly up to her. Instead, she stood a meter shy of her. Seeing this, the Empress Dowager patted the seat at the side and smiled. "Come, sit down, and chat with me." She wanted to see if this little girl was really not afraid of her or if she was just acting. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com. Chapter 431 Palace Banquet 3. I'm afraid that's inappropriate of me. As a commoner, I cannot sit on this seat. Ju Ying shook her head and smiled. The third prince couldn't figure out what the Empress Dowager was thinking, so he stood up and said, Imperial Grandmother, don't scare her. I'm still counting on her to cook a few delicious meals for me. Oh, that means her cooking isn't bad. The Empress Dowager asked in surprise. At the same time, seeing her neither servile nor overbearing attitude, she knew that Ju Ying was not afraid of her. It was just that it was not easy to press on further due to her imperial status. After that, she asked her personal maid, Nanny Liu, to bring a stool for Ju Ying to sit on her right. Yes, her cooking is quite to my taste, the third prince replied. Really? What's your specialty? The Empress Dowager turned to look at Ju Ying. Egg fried rice, Ju Ying replied after a moment of surprise. Egg fried rice, it's a very simple dish. Yes, but it tests one's skills the most. In addition to not sticking to the pot, the rice also needs to be separately dipped in the egg, so that the egg and rice fragrance blend and permeate each other until they fuse into one. This is so that there is egg in the rice and rice in the egg. When the Empress Dowager heard her description, she immediately imagined what her egg-fried rice looked like. She couldn't help but nod and say, now that you say it, I'm indeed craving a plate. When you have time, cook some for me to try. At your command. Ju Ying nodded. After that, the Empress Dowager asked the third prince a few more questions, especially about his daily life. Finally, she asked, do you have a girl you like? If you do, you must tell your grandmother. Otherwise, it will be too late once the marriage is decided tonight. No, I don't have anyone. The third prince shook his head. All these years, he had been staying in Dongyang. For safety reasons, he rarely left his residence, which meant he had no chance to interact with girls. How could he find a girl he liked this way? So, what kind of person are you looking for? You must have a rough idea, right? There are two main points. One is to be strong-willed, and the other is to be upright. I'm rarely in the capital. So, as long as she can support the family and teach our child well, that would be great. The Empress Dowager nodded in agreement. You're right. If a woman doesn't have a good heart and a strong will, she can't be the daughter-in-law of the royal family. Even if she became one, it wouldn't be a stable relationship. This was an essential trait of the royal family, especially true being an empress. Thinking of this, the Empress Dowager sighed as she remembered a girl from the Ju family. Just then, someone led a group of elderly imperial madams in and bowed to the Empress Dowager and the third prince. Imperial Grandmother, elders, please continue your talks. We'll take our leave now. The third prince stood up. Greetings, Empress Dowager. I will take my leave. Ju Ying followed suit and bowed. Grandson, you guys can go. As for Ju Ying, do stay, and I'll bring you over later, the Empress Dowager said to the three of them. After that, she asked Ju Ying to sit back down. I'll leave it to Imperial Grandmother. The third prince hesitated for a moment before nodding. He turned around and left Longevity Palace with Jiyu Chungrui and Ju Huaiming. After they left, a hunchbacked old woman in her 60s looked at the Empress Dowager and asked, Empress Dowager, could this be the girl that the third prince has taken a fancy to? For that, you're wrong. She's the girl who was wed into the Jiyu family to wash off Pingyang's bad luck. I like this child's temperament. The Empress Dowager shook her head and introduced Ju Ying. She's King An's consort. She got along quite well with your grandmother a few years ago. This commoner, Ju Ying, greets consorten. Ju Ying stood up and bowed. Do raise your head. How's your grandmother now? She's quite healthy. When she's busy, she does some farm work. When she's free, she goes outside to bask in the sun and chat with the other older women in the village. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com. Because it was this old woman who had been burdened with shrouds of blood debts while praying to Mother Goddess. Ju Ying had not expected her to be the mother of the current empress. No wonder the empress and the first prince were great at murder. It seemed like they had an excellent upbringing. After greeting them, Ju Ying obediently retreated aside and listened to their conversation. Soon, she discovered that other than the 3 elderly consorts of the royal family, everyone else was here to praise and speak well of their granddaughters. In short, they were here to recommend their children to the Empress Dowager. Even Madame Ju had tried her best to compliment her granddaughter, Ju Jiaqing, Principal Ju's youngest daughter. However, from the original Ju Ying's memories, she knew Ju Jiaqing was not a good person by any means. In front of the elders, she was a sweet and obedient girl who everyone loved. However, the original Ju Ying had seen her harming and torturing small animals more than once. She would even beat and scold the servants whenever she was unhappy. It would be a blessing if Ju Jiaqing could avoid causing trouble after marrying into the royal family, much less basking in any glory. Then there was Madame Kui, who praised Yang Wanyu as much as possible and never once mentioned Yang Waning. However, Ju Ying did not open her mouth to remind her about Yang Waning. The more they ignored Yang Waning, the more they would be disgusted by the Yang family when Yang Waning appeared. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com. Chapter 433 Palace Banquet 5. Soon, more and more people came to pay their respects to the Empress Dowager, many of whom were from the younger generations. Many came over to greet the Empress Dowager and chatted for a while before leaving. The ones who stayed behind were the elderly women and the others who had come to curry favor with the Empress Dowager. These were the women who wanted to marry their daughters to the third prince. Seeing this, Ju Ying sat at the side and drank her tea. She would only speak when someone asked about her. However, because of her low status, no one paid attention to her except the Empress Dowager. Ju Ying was feeling carefree. Since she was free, she spread out her spiritual senses to look at what was inside the imperial palace. Although it was already winter, many flowers bloomed, making the palace lively. Of course, other than the remote courtyard that looked eerie and creepy. Finally, her gaze stopped on Yang Waning. Ju Ying saw her sitting quietly in the pavilion at the side. She held a cup with both hands and looked into the distance in a daze, with no one knowing what she was thinking. "Hey, aren't you Yang Waning? Why are you sitting here alone in a daze?" At this moment, a petite girl of about 15 or 16 years old walked over and asked. Yang Waning turned her head and saw the person who had approached her. She immediately stood up and bowed. "Greetings to the 8th princess. There's no need to be so polite. Take a seat." The 8th princess sat down after she finished speaking. She sized Yang Waning up and said with disdain, TSK, your clothes are too old-fashioned. This doesn't seem like your style. It's good enough that it isn't disrespectful." Yang Waning smiled. At the same time, Yang Waning became vigilant because the 8th princess was the empress daughter. She was the Gu family's sworn enemy and would definitely not have good intentions towards her. Of course, she did not have a good impression of the 8th princess. "Isn't she rude? Don't forget what occasion we're in today." At this moment, Yang Wanyu walked over with a group of sisters. Everyone looked at her clothes and immediately started to criticize her. When the 8th princess saw this, she disdainfully added, "One can't believe you have the nerve to participate in the selection of the main consort with this dress. One believe you should go home as soon as possible, lest you make a fool of yourself. Indeed, by doing this, you're indicating that you don't take this banquet seriously." Someone immediately echoed, "Come on, everyone. Her mother died less than a year ago. It's not suitable for her to wear bright-colored clothes. Besides, the one in charge of the young residents was a concubine. Do you think she will prepare suitable clothes for her?" At this moment, a 17 or 18-year-old girl in riding attire looked at everyone with disdain. When the girls heard this, they were stunned momentarily and bowed respectfully. "Greetings, Princess Mingyu. Rise." Mingyu waved the whip in her hand and then looked at Yang Wanyu disdainfully. All the women reacted at this moment and turned to look at Yang Wanyu in unison. The current head of the Yang family is her biological mother, so her mother must have prepared that dress. Looking at Yang Wanyu, she was clad in exquisite clothing from top to bottom. They were several grades higher than any clothing she had ever worn. Compared to Yang Waning, Mingyu looked at everyone's reaction and sneered, "You all are not stupid." However, a concubine's child will always be a concubine's child. She will never consider the bigger picture. Yang Wanning is your eldest sister. If she loses dignity, you won't be gaining any, either. Besides, her dress was prepared by your mother, right? If you laugh at her, aren't you laughing at yourself? Spending her mother's dowry and laughing at her pitifulness, what thick skin you have. Follow current novels on tarpnovelful.com. Chapter 434 Palace Banquet, 6. After Princess Mingyu said that, she sat at the table and looked at the 8th princess. Besides your identity as the first wife's daughter, you're also a princess. In the future, don't hang out with these unpresentable people. It's unbefitting of your status. The 8th princess lips twitched. Thank you for your teachings, Aunt Mingyu. At the same time, she loathed Princess Mingyu so much that her teeth itched. Not only did this woman snatch the love that her imperial father and imperial grandmother should have given her, but how dare she lecture her shamelessly? The 8th princess gritted her teeth in anger. She also looked down on Yang Wanyu's status. What did she mean by that? The 8th princess mother was also a consort. Was she saying that the 8th princess and her brother's status was lower than the 3rd prince's? At the thought of this, the 8th princess wanted to raise her hand and hit Princess Mingyu. However, she forcefully suppressed her anger when she saw the whip in her hand. On the other end, Yang Wanyu looked at everyone with eyes about to cry. She was here to belittle Yang Wanning, so how did it turn around in the blink of an eye, and all of it was directed at her? She quickly stuttered, "No, what? Are you saying your mother didn't prepare her clothes, or did your family's expenses not come from the Jiyu family's dowry?" Yang Wanyu stammered for a moment before turning around and running away. That's it. Such an uneducated girl, running away without even excusing yourself. Mingyu spoke again. The girls lowered their heads and tried to hold back their laughter. Princess Mingyu was as daring as the legends said. If Lord Yang heard this, he would be furious. While Yang Wanning was grateful to her, she was also worried for her. In her previous life, Princess Mingyu had offended the Empress faction in her previous life because of her straightforwardness. In the end, the residence of King An was buried with her for her insolence. When the 8th princess saw that Mingyu was sitting steadily, she knew that she no longer had the chance to bully Yang Wanning. She stood up, bowed, and left. After this, the girls followed her out one after another. After everyone left, Mingyu downed a glass of water and turned to look at Yang Wanning. "Why aren't you leaving yet? Why should one leave?" Yang Wanning smiled and asked. Mingyu looked at her kind smile and was stunned for a moment. "Aren't you afraid of offending them? You saw their attitude toward me. It's useless for me to curry favor with them." As Yang Wanning said this, she poured Princess Mingyu another glass of water. "I still have to thank Princess Mingyu for standing up for me just now. I just can't stand what they are doing, especially Yang Wanyu. Such shamelessness." Mingyu resentfully spat. "You too. You're too soft-hearted. If it were me, I would have slapped her till tomorrow. Just like you said, the Yang residence is now under Madame Qui's and her daughter's control, so anyone wise will understand what is going on. The fiercer they make a fuss and the ruder they become, the worse people's impression of them will be in the end, right?" Yang Wanning replied. When Chun Hong returned her cousin's message, she initially did not know what to make of it. Only when she read the message's end did she understand her cousin's intention. Since Madame Qui wanted to ruin her reputation, then let her be. When people realized what was happening, they would return the ridicule and sarcasm to the mother and daughter. At that time, she would wear the clothes that her cousin had prepared for her. She would not lose face in front of the royal family and would also give the mother and daughter a fierce slap in the face. Just thinking about it made her feel happy. Mingyu was amused when she heard that. She patted her shoulder and said, "The two of us are really at opposite extremes. I'm straightforward by nature, and you do things roundaboutly. It would be great if we could share some of our personalities with each other. It would save my mother from scolding me for being stupid every day." Follow current novels on tapnovelful.com. Chapter 435 Palace Banquet, 7. You're not stupid, just that you're straightforward with your words. Yang Wanning hesitated momentarily and added, but you should be careful with your words in the future. If my father hears what one said today, he will definitely be angry. At that time, he might even find trouble with you or even your imperial residence. If he dares, I'll let imperial uncle deal with him. Besides, I'm telling the truth. Sometimes you can't always tell the truth. You should give King An a reminder later. Mingyu looked at her solemn expression and finally nodded. After that, the more they chatted, the more they bonded. They even laughed out loud from time to time. Sitting in the pavilion next door, the 8th princess gritted her teeth when she heard their laughter. Thinking of her mother's plan, she summoned her personal palace maid, Lian Qiao, and whispered some instructions. Lian Qiao nodded and left in a hurry. Not long after, a palace maid carried a pot of water into the pavilion where Yang Wanning and the others were. Taking advantage of the opportunity to refill the teapot, she deliberately tilted her foot so that the teapot spout was facing Yang Wanning, and the water spilled all over her. It was so hot that Yang Wanning stood in shock and pulled out her undergarments. Seeing this, Mingyu stepped forward and slapped the palace maid. "What are you doing?" After saying that, she checked on Yang Wanning and asked, "Wanning, are you alright?" Fortunately, the water is not too hot. Otherwise, a layer of my skin would have peeled off. Yang Wanning shook her head. "Let's go. I'll bring you to change your clothes. Otherwise, your clothes won't dry in time." After Mingyu finished speaking, she brought her out of the pavilion. When the wind blew on the road, Yang Wanning's wet left leg felt a bone-piercing chill. At the same time, she was also thinking about the possibility of a conspiracy. She was afraid that this was another scheme devised by Madame Kui. If she went to change her clothes, would she be set up again? Thinking of this, the vigilance in her heart tightened, and she grabbed Mingyu tightly. As long as they were still together, no one would dare scheme against her. However, her guesses were soon verified. Princess Mingyu had just sent Yang Wanning to the lounge when a eunuch came to look for her. He said that the emperor was waiting anxiously for her. Only then did Mingyu realize she had something to discuss with the emperor. She could only arrange for a palace maid to send Yang Wanning some clothes and leave quickly. Seeing this, Yang Wanning had no choice but to be vigilant. On the other end, Zhu Ying saw that Yang Wanning's clothes were wet. She informed Jiyu Chungrue and then went back to keep an eye on Yang Wanning. After Jiyu Chungrue received the news, he realized someone was plotting against Yang Wanning. Therefore, he went to the 3rd prince and said he wanted to send Yang Wanning some clothes. The 3rd prince nodded and sent Granny Liu to rush over with her clothes and palace maids. On the other end, after Yang Wanning entered the lounge, the palace maid quickly sent over a set of Mingyu clothes. However, she was knocked unconscious and brought to a room next door. Seeing this, Zhu Ying simply used her spiritual senses to knock out the palace maid who had knocked out the one bringing clothes. Yang Wanning quickly changed her clothes. As soon as she removed her clothes, Zhu Ying saw a eunuch blowing smoke into the room. Zhu Ying used her spiritual senses to block the mouth of his pipe, and the eunuch immediately choked and fainted. Later, Granny Liu also arrived with her clothes. When she saw a fainted eunuch holding a blowpipe outside, she roughly understood what had happened. Follow current novels on tapnovelful.com. Chapter 436 Palace Banquet, 8. Granny Liu immediately went forward to check on him. After confirming that he had really fainted, she asked 2 young palace maids to send the young eunuch to a room at the side. Only then did she walk to the door and knock on it. "Miss Yang Wanning, is that you? The 3rd prince sent me to deliver the clothes at the request of young master Jiyu Chungrue." Yang Wanning was surprised when she heard Jiyu Chengrue's name. She quickly put on her half-undressed clothes and went forward to open the door. "Thank you, Granny. Can you pass me the clothes?" Just as Granny Liu was about to pass the clothes to her, The two palace maids who had carried the young eunuch hurried over and whispered into Granny Liu's ear. Granny Liu's expression changed. She gave them a few more instructions and then told Yang Wanning, Miss Yang is too polite, but don't change in this room. Follow me. After saying that, she turned around and left with her clothes. Yang Wanning hesitated for a moment before following Granny Liu. Ultimately, she changed into the clothes that Jiyu Chungrue had prepared for her in a side room not far away. She wore an aqua blue dress with a deep blue interior and a light blue exterior. It made her look fair and young and accentuated her figure perfectly. The headdress on her head was not made of gold, silver, or jade but of simple jewelry made of blue crystal. Although wearing it didn't give her a magnificent look, it was still eye-catching. After Granny Liu finished dressing her up, she looked at her thoughtfully and said, Miss Yang, you have a good figure and looks. You will definitely stand out today. It's mainly because of Granny Liu's help. Thank you for today. If it weren't for you, Yang Wanning couldn't help but shed tears as she said this. She really did not expect Madame Kui and her schemes to be this vicious. If she succeeded today, Yang Wanning would definitely lose her reputation and die a horrible death. It seemed that Madame Kui was much more vicious than she had imagined. She had to be more careful in the future. You're lucky today. So, don't think about this anymore. Granny Liu was halfway through her sentence when a clamor came from not far away. Hurry up and pack up. Let's go watch the show. She coldly chuckled. After saying that, she immediately packed the clothes, the comb, and the rouge powder she had brought and then walked out excitedly. Yang Wanning was surprised when she saw this. She hadn't expected that Granny Liu would be this gossipy. As soon as they left the room, they saw a large group of people standing outside where they had stopped earlier. At the same time, there was also a furious roar from Madame Kui, Yang Wanning, oh, Yang Wanning, you've disgraced the Yang family. How could you do such a thing in the palace? How could you be bold enough to steal in the palace? Moreover, you're with the famous playboy, Chen Fang. Someone immediately echoed. Soldiers, capture all of them and throw them into the pond. At this moment, the Empress' angry voice sounded. Hey! What happened? Why is someone calling my name, and throwing who into the pond? Yang Wanning walked over and asked with a puzzled look. Everyone turned to look after hearing that. When they confirmed that she was the real Yang Wanning, they were all stunned. If Wn Ning was here, then the one in the room was. Seeing this, a tall and strong woman squeezed in and asked loudly, Mrs. Yang, are you sure it's Yang Wanning inside? Yang Wanning is here, you know? Yeah, hurry up and see who that woman is. Yang Wanning isn't the thief after all. Madame Kui, who was in the room, heard their words and froze. She quickly went forward and pulled the woman out. When she saw that it was an unfamiliar face, she froze. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.